Um, so, when we look at our life, there's stress, right? Stress, anger, grief, responsibility, debt. There's so many things that just seem like these big old storms, don't they? Like just these huge storms. And a guy named Elijah. You don't know who Elijah is? Way back in the Old Testament. So he's this really amazing prophet of God. And Elijah is very upset at this point in his life. He had just gone through witnessed this huge battle between where people were praying or worshiping this god named Baal. And so Elijah called down the fire of God to prove that God was God. That went really well. But then this very next moment, Elijah is on the run for his life. And he's afraid. So you got this prophet that was so confident in one moment. Then this next moment, it's too much. So he's on the run. And Bathsheba, who is this really kind of mean woman, wants to kill him. And so he runs. And in this part of the story, we're not going to go way into Elijah's story, but in this part of the story, he's in this cave. And he's just kind of at the end. He don't know what to do next. And he can't see anything past his own fear of his life. And so, but he's had it. And I've been, I can relate to kind of how he feels. So Elijah said, this is in 1 Kings 19. He says, I have zealously served the Lord God Almighty, but the people of Israel have broken their covenant with you, torn down your altars, and killed every one of your prophets. I am the only one left, and now they're trying to kill me too. He's happy. So the Lord says, go out and stand before me on the mountain. And Elijah goes out, and the Lord passes by. And a mighty windstorm hits the mountain. It was such a terrible blast that rocks were torn loose. But God was not in the wind. After the wind, there was an earthquake, but God was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, there was a fire, but God was not in the fire. So in that story, we find out where God was for Elijah. He had been in the fire when there was this tremendous battle. But for Elijah on that day, he was in the gentle wind. And so it's pretty interesting that for Elijah on that day, God's approach to him was to not show him his power in force. But it was to let him know that he was there with him. He was present with him. Why do you think that is, really? What do you think that is? Why would it be so important that God let Elijah know he was right there? Have you ever felt like Elijah? Yes.
I did.
You have? Yeah. Yeah, I have.
I believe God overlooked me a couple of times.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, you feel like you've done everything. You've done everything you can, but you end up in this storm. So Peter is in this boat. And he was told to get in the boat by Jesus. He's rowing. He looks out, and he thinks he sees a ghost. It turns out it's Jesus, and that doesn't make sense. But then Jesus asks him to get out of the boat. And what happened? What happened when he got out of the boat? Right after he got out of the boat, what happened? He walked on water. Then what happened? the point about Elijah, his story about, right there in the cave, and the story that we get from Peter, the thing that we can pull out of that I pulled out of it this week, was that we're going to have those times when things hit us, and we may think they're the most powerful thing we've ever faced, and they're bigger than us, and there's no way to face them. And if Peter had focused on that first, he never would have got out of the boat. He would have thought, I don't know, he may have thought, I don't know if this boat's even going to make it in this storm. I'm certainly not going to get out of it. But he did get out of it. He did get out of it. And so, and what happened when he sunk? It's funny when I read that story because it seems to me that Jesus is way off out in the water. So he sees him, but he's kind of way off there. Like he sees him like an image out there somewhere. But when Peter sinks, Jesus gets him. He gets him, right? He saves him and puts him right back in the boat. So he was right there. The whole time he was right there with him. Not way out there. He was with him. And with Elijah, he thought, where are you, God? I've done it all. Done everything I can. Where are you? And all these things that weren't personally connected to him, the wind, the earthquake, the fire, all happened. But that wasn't where God was at that point. He was in this gentle whisper right there. And so when we look at our life, we think, there's so much going on and I can't control this and it's out of control. And I just can't. I've done everything you've asked of me, perhaps, and still, here I am. And we wonder, where is God in this? And I think it's been an interesting week for me to look at this because we just launched Kenna on this trip. And that was tough to do. And that was interesting because we went down last week to Atlanta to launch her, and there was all these families with different faith traditions and stuff coming together. And it was really interesting how different we were. We were coming together with the same, the parents were coming with the same common bond that we thought our kids were crazy, and that they were going off on this mission trip, and we had to accept it because they were going, And it was really interesting to hear the stories of the other families. And I want to share with you about one of the people, but I want to show you a picture. If I can. I don't know if I saved it. How about I didn't save it here? Well, I'll post it on my thing. But it's a picture of Kenna's teammate, Lindsay. And yesterday they were at this children's ministry. And it's children who are kids of guerrilla warfare kids, And so a lot of the kids that they ministered to yesterday have been in this ministry less time than Kenna's team has been there. Like they've been there 2 days. They just rescued them like 2 days ago. And so, so this picture is of Lindsay, her teammate, holding this child up, just having a great time with him, little bitty boy. Well, I got to meet, Shannon and I met Lindsay's dad at the launch. And we had this one moment where all the women, all the mothers went in one meeting and all the guys went in the other meeting so we could just talk about each other and not know it. Not really good. it was kind of, so ours was kind of like a man, man's bonding. Oh, that's kind of the thing. And we started telling our stories. And Lindsay's dad said, he said, I'm a bricklayer. I do stone and brickwork for fronts of houses and stuff. And Lindsay and I have a great relationship. She works with me in that, And he said, I just didn't see this coming. But she came to me and said, Dad, so I've decided I need to go on this mission trip. And it's called World Race, and I need to raise $17,000. And he said, my first reaction was, that's nice, Lindsay. And he's thinking, you'll never raise $17,000, so I don't have to worry about it. You'll discover you can't raise $17,000, and it won't be a problem. He said, and I decided I could hire her for the summer, and she would make that money if I hired her to let her do it. He said, but I'm not going to do that. If she wants to do it, I need her to realize that some things you can't do everything. And so Lindsay started raising money. She did things like we did, like she had spaghetti suppers, and she got a job where all of her tips went for this trip. And he said, before I knew it, she had raised like $11,000. And then he thought, well, this can't be just Lindsay by herself. There has to be something to this. This really must be a God thing that's going on. So he got on board. And I can really relate to that because with Kenna, we really thought, how in the world? But somewhere around July, after we had our first spaghetti supper, it occurred to me that in about 4 weeks, Kenna had raised $8,000 and needed to raise 10 by the end of August, or the end of July. I was like Peter in the boat, And Kenna was also like Peter in a boat. But Kenna, in this experience for her, I believe she could see Jesus, and she didn't see all the doubt and all the storms and all the wind and all the water and all the things that made sense logically. She saw, I feel this calling, and I'm going to raise $17,000. And when I saw her in action, I saw it. And then I'm like, okay, I'm in. So then we spent all of July raising money, and she's on this trip. She still has to raise. She's now raised $11,000 and has to raise $17,000 by the end of November. I now have no doubt that it's just not going to be a problem. It's a lot of money, but it's convinced me that there is when you're called to something, it's bigger than the waves and stuff around you. It's also convinced me that God really is right there to catch us, even when we don't think He is. When Elijah was waiting for this, where are you? Had to have that where are you God moment, and heard Him in a gentle whisper. You ever heard that still small voice, that kind of phrase? When someone whispers to us, that means it doesn't work. If my sister Beth is way out there by the door and she whispers to me, I'm probably not going to hear her. Too far away. She's just too far away. Whispering. And I really think that's why God comes to us that way. It's because He's right here. It's a personal, connected relationship. And He's right here. Even when we're convinced that everything else around us makes, proves that he can't be. Because it's too big and too noisy. It's so noisy that we can't hear him. When all the time, it's because the noise is making us not hear him. It really is that it's where our attention is. And what we believe at that moment. Peter, I doubt he wanted to get out of the boat. I wouldn't want to get out of the boat. But at that moment, he saw he was locked in with where Jesus was. And at that moment, he had no doubt. And at that moment, he understood that he was as safe on the water as he was in the boat. And what a tremendous concept that is. That we can step out even when it doesn't make sense, and we're just as safe as we were before we stepped out. That's an amazing concept. It's one that I'm not good at personally, and Kenna's trip is kind of teaching me where I am with things, and it's also stretching me and growing me and all that kind of stuff. And it's making me get out of the boat when I don't want to. And I didn't know I was in a boat for the first. I'm in my boat. She's in her boat. I'm in my boat. But it's a boat that I didn't mean to get in. And she's constantly, her mission trip is causing me to have to step out of that boat over and over. And it's just tough. And it's me accepting that she's as safe in Colombia as she is here. And I can look at the news and say, well, that's true, because there's a lot going on here. But that's really not the point. The point is, God is with her, here or there, and he's with me here or there, in the boat, out of the boat. But it takes practice. It takes practice to be in a storm, in grief, in worry and in doubt, and still listen for that still small voice. And then be able to respond to it. So there's three things I'd like us to think about with this. The first is, and I'm really bad at this one, it's to stop. Because there's too much noise. There's way too much noise that we let in. It's like what Jamie read Jamie Ann, she read this the first part, and I sent this to Kenna like 2 nights ago. The thing about the dropping it down and all that, because she's on a 60-day sabbatical away from Facebook and all that stuff, just to get away from it. There's all this noise. So the first thing is to allow yourself to be still, because there's so much noise, and God is right here, and it's so hard to hear him when there's all this noise. So, but I'm not good at stopping, and I'm not good at quiet, and I'm not good at, maybe I don't even want to hear what he has to say to me, because he wants me to get out of the boat yet again. So stop and be still. John 14:16 says, "And I will pray the Father, and he will give you another helper, that he may abide with you forever." The word abide is kind of like that. It's like hanging out with God. It's like abiding with him, resting with him. Being, abide. Don't do anything. Abide. It's so hard to take time for that. But it's so important. And it takes practice. Do it. The second thing is to acknowledge that God is in the ordinary. He's not just in the wind and the fire and the big things. He's in the conversations you have at work. And he's in your kitchen when you're, preparing things. And he's in your pool in the backyard. And he's He's in these places that give you that feed you. That's why they feed you. You know, if he's in it, it feeds you. That's why he's in these conversations you have at work that become deeper and meaningful when we let that happen. God is in the ordinary. He's in the everyday. He's even in the storm. He's even in that storm. But it's just recognizing that he's there. And the second thing is so we're listening for God. We're taking time to do that. We're acknowledging that he's in all things. He's in the ordinary. And then we choose to act. And maybe that act is just to receive that. Let him be with us. So don't be by yourself. Let him be with us. I've asked Caitlin, this is your cue. Caitlin's going to read a story from a friend of ours from the SPEC team that Tim Decker shared this week on Facebook, and I thought it was an incredible testimony about taking what could be a stormy time in his life, the anniversary of his son's death, but still listening and knowing that God is in every conversation and with him and listening to the promptings of that.
Today began as a day when I would be away from home for most of the day on the 6th anniversary of our son Timothy's passing. While I had hoped to visit Timothy's grave early in the day, my flight to Washington, D.C. was simply too early. The love of my life, soulmate, and wife of over 36 years made sure I made it to the airport. Lori's immense ability to share her love and faith through hugs, exuberant energy, ministerial presence, and uplifting comments sent me off to a great start. At the Southwest Airlines counter, I met 2 customer service agents that got and could equally surpass my wit and humor, just as Timothy would do. One of the agents, named Stephanie, promptly recorded my TSA pre-check status, came from behind the counter to visit, and eventually touched me on the shoulder and wished me a safe and joyful journey to my destination. Sitting just behind me on the plane was one of our Community of Christ World Church leaders on his way to lead a family church camp. Next to him was a couple on their way to a funeral of an 80-year-old veteran at Arlington Cemetery. Greeting me at the Marriott Hotel in Arlington, Virginia, was a VIP desk manager named Lydia, who had come to this country from Africa a few years ago and was now married with a 4-month-old child. As we talked for several minutes about family, friends, and community, we concluded that the world needed more kindness, faith, and friendship. I later received a note and chocolates delivered to my room thanking me for being kind. My dinner was served by a gracious, wise, and friendly gentleman from Bolivia. Antonio showed me his wallet and identification at the conclusion of my meal to show that his last name was also Decker. It appears that a small group of German beer makers migrated to Bolivia and married Bolivian women and raised their children. Antonio and I are now self-appointed cousins and friends. The moral of this impossible-to-make-up true story is that God is always with us and his angels and shepherds surround us. The other reminder is more personal to each of us. We are called to be the shepherds. We never know what the people around us are going through, and we must venture out of our comfort zones and lead with faith, love, and relentless acts of kindness, and perhaps some chocolate.
This next week, this moment, maybe each one of us are individually in a place that may feel like calm waters. It may feel like just rocky waters, And you may feel like the wind is just great and just feels great on your face, or it may just be smashing the rocks around you because it's so strong. In all those places, we're called individually to know and to stop and be still and listen for God's voice because He's right there. Even in those places it's so noisy, we don't hear Him. Then we're called to acknowledge Him. To say, I know none of this makes sense. If I step out, I'm going to sink. And that's everything in my mind's telling me that. But I know You've got me. And I know I'm not alone. And then the third thing is to act. And maybe the best thing we can do to act is just to receive and say, yeah, I agree, I'm not alone. And that may be the best thing you can do. It may be more than that. It may be taking a conversation that would just be up here and doing what Tim did. I've flown many times. I've never known people like he knew him on that trip, where he knew their story. I've done that here and there, but not like that. Not in one day, where he knew the flight attendants, he knew the people at the hotel, he knew the guy that served him dinner. And it's the anniversary of his son's death. Same day. That calls me to get out of my own head and look around and see what blessings are around me. And take a conversation and let that still small voice guide me in that. Because I don't have to. We can stumble through things. And we may feel very stumbly in that. Like, I don't know what to say or what to do. But we're not there alone. At Christmas time, we talk about Emmanuel. You know what Emmanuel means? God with us. The Bible, so many places, talks about, it's just a very good point in the Bible. Section 139 talks about, every hair on my head. Matthew 28, 16 through 20, or probably around 20, says, I am with you always to the end of the age. God makes a point of, we know He's powerful, but personally, we know He's with us. And He makes the point over and over again to let us know that. Through the Scriptures, but also through the Holy Spirit working with us. So my prayer for all of us is that this week, even in the storms, even when we're called to get out of the boat, that we don't pay so much attention to the noise and the wind and the water and what can happen. But we keep focused on the one who will catch us and be with us.